Hey there, it's Blair here at Time Trades. Thanks for joining me this weekend. Okay, we've got a lot to cover in this video. I think this will be a longer than average video. So I'm going to put some time markers in the comments below on YouTube there. So if you want to skip through to a certain section that interests you, go right ahead. So let's dive right into it. It's been a very volatile week. Last week we talked about a potential recovery on price, and we certainly saw that. It was a very strong move up through Wednesday. And then Facebook earnings hit and smashed the market down. These are the cues we're looking at. And now we're trying to figure out where do we go from here. So I thought it would be good if we took a step back and just sort of looked at our overall framework for time and price tools. So I'm going to remind everyone of this kind of model that I like to apply. So of course, price is the most important. It's how we get paid. It's how we manage risk. It's not really part of the time trade service, but it's a critical part of any investment decision. Next, I want to talk about context and what we're seeing in terms of the overall timing context that's out there. And then finally, we'll drill down onto the daily forecasts. So let's get started by looking at price in TradingView. Okay, so again, these are the cues here in TradingView. And what do we see here? Well, we've got price is below the blue lines, which are anchored VWAPs. So one of the ways that I like to combine time and price is to anchor VWAP indicator to the purple lines, which often indicate local pivots. So I've got VWAP anchored to the 5 most recent pivot lines, starting with this one here, and that's the thick teal blue line. And then every successive purple line after that gets a new VWAP anchored. So right now, the price of the Qs is below 4 out of those 5 VWAPs. That's bearish. I've also drawn a channel here connecting the 2 lows that if you're an Elliott wave trader, you would probably label this 1, 2, 3. So I've connected the bottom of 1 and what looks like 3 and drawn a parallel channel up here. So price remains in this channel and it's a downward sloping channel. And again, if you're familiar with Elliott wave theory, then that would indicate that there's another 5th wave to come that could match the bottom of 3 or go below it. So that's another bearish indicator on price. And then what else can we see here with respect to price? Well, I've got these orange lines here which are, I kind of informally call them magic levels. These are levels that I've applied based on the work of Connie Brown and her 30-second Joule book. So these are Pythagorean lines, Pythagorean ratios, and I found them to be very, very useful. You can see how these lines up here caught the high at 403 and proved to be very strong resistance. And then also down here with the swoosh down on January 24th at 335, it provided very strong support. So whenever I see a gap down over these lines, I like to trade in the direction of that gap, okay? So this is giving some very important information here that this gap down over the 362 level and below the 362 level is an important piece of information. You can see over here back in October how the gap up over 362 launched a massive 40-point rally in the Qs, okay? So all told, the price information looks bearish. Now, that being said, it's very close to the end of the cycle. We're coming up to the teal lines here, which is part of the overall context. So if we go back to our mental model of how we like to look at time and price, The next items we're going to look at here are the cheat code time periods, the short-term waves, and the Gann waves. So staying within trading view, we've got the time trades indicator up. We've got the green boxes and purple boxes. Purple lines indicate local pivots, and that proved to be the case back Wednesday, the 26th, when that was a local high for the week. Price came down and then boosted up, okay? We're coming into a teal line, and teal lines tend to be major pivots. So we can scroll back in time and see what happened the last time we hit a teal line here. Certainly back here in August of 2021, that was very close to a major pivot high, and then it corrected down into October before boosting up. Over here in March of 2021, pretty much tagged the major low for that green period cycle to the day. And if we go back even further, we can see the last time there was a double teal, there was quite a bit of volatility for a period of about 3 weeks here. And there was a bottom a couple days before the first teal, and then a move up, and then another bottom a couple days before the second teal, and then a move up. And then finally, after the second teal, we started to see a new trend emerge, okay? So lots of volatility around the double teals the last time that happened in September 2020, okay? All right, so that sort of sets our expectations about what could happen here in terms of overall context. I'm looking for a major pivot to occur sometime around these teal lines. I don't know exactly when or what sort of overall pattern it will be or at what price it will occur at, but this whole sort of volatile bottoming pattern that we seem to be in at the moment, I would be looking to see that complete by the 23rd of February with the end of the last teal line, and then a new trend will emerge. I don't know exactly what direction that trend will be. I think I would give very good odds on it reversing and heading up, given we've spent most of this green box so far going down, and often these teal lines tend to be major pivots. However, that doesn't always happen. Sometimes the teal lines, sometimes the trend is so strong it just blows right through the teal in the midpoint of the green box, and there's no major reversal here. But I'm going to go by what happens most frequently. Okay, so that's a summary of the context of the time trades cheat code indicator. Let's go and take a look at what we're seeing here in terms of context on the Gann waves and the short-term waves within time trades. Okay, so of the short-term waves, the one I'm looking at the most right now is yellow. And when yellow tends to move up, that in general is bullish. So you can see the yellow line here moving up, and you can see the last time it moved up and it was in the same spot in the cycle. That was bullish back in October, and we can scroll back in time a little bit more. We can see the last time that happened in July 2021, again, more bullishness. And even back in February, there was a little peak, but then a big drop afterwards. So in general, yellow going up is supportive for the market, okay? The other thing we're looking at here is the Gann waves, which are the yellow and blue stripes. And when we look back on the Qs and we see the patterns here, we can see that there tends to be peaks in and around yellow, okay? So back in November, there was a peak right on yellow. Back in December, there was a bottom within yellow, and then it boosted, blasted right up into a high on December 28th. And January 12th, there was a high just before yellow. So somewhere around here, it feels like there's going to be a high, okay? Now, when we look at the forecasts, if we drop down into the daily forecast, we can start to see that there's some probabilities of moves down. These are not huge though, okay? It's like a 6% probability of a 2 standard deviation move down on Monday, 5% on Tuesday. There's a big probability of a 1 standard deviation move down in the Qs on Monday. 1 standard deviation down is 3% over the last 5 bars. Okay, so if you take the price 5 bars ago, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, it's this one here because we also count the new bar that emerges. So if we take that bar there, which closed at 365, subtract 3% from that, and you can estimate a probable price based on past behavior and what the machine learning is forecasting. So that is indicating Monday, Tuesday, there's probabilities of down days. This gap up here and the fact that it aligns with the Gann wave yellow period tells me that it's likely we're going to see a move up. But then we start to come into a period of down days over here in February. So after yellow completes, looks like this down move might continue into, February 24th, 25th. And that is also right around when the second teal line wraps up. The second teal line is on February 23rd. So we're starting to see some confluence between the forecasts, the daily forecasts, and the overall context. And that's kind of what we like to see. So there's a couple other things I like to do when I'm looking at indexes. I like to look at multiple indexes and not just one. This has been a pretty detailed review of the Qs. Let's see what the spiders are telling us. Okay, so here's the spiders. The spiders aren't really telling us much for next week, but there is a resumption of some of the down pressure that we see in the Qs with big moves down February 23rd and also March 2nd. And we can see that there's a big pivot low on March 4th. So that is interesting information. It doesn't really contradict anything we see in the Qs. It seems to be in rough directional alignment. Let's take a look at the diamonds. So the diamonds is, we were looking at a low in the diamonds February 3 and 4, a pivot low. And Friday, it looks low-ish. It's probably premature to call that a pivot low because we don't know what price is like yet. But there's another probability of a pivot low coming up on the 9th, which is Wednesday. Again, that roughly aligns with the Qs in terms of direction. And then we see some more down pressure coming up here after the yellow period as well. And finally, let's take a look at IWM. Okay, so IWM, very similar to the Qs, strong confluence here. We've got a couple of low probability down days coming up Monday and Tuesday. However, there is some 2 standard deviation moves being forecast. So 2 standard deviation moves are very rare and they tend to be accurate, even though this is a low probability. It's only 17% probability. So it'd be nicer if this was a higher probability, but still, that's an important piece of information. And then we've got a gap here in the down pressure that coincides with the yellow Gann wave, which is great. And then after that, we've got moves down resuming. Okay. So before we move on to other stocks, I want to share with you something that's really interesting that I discovered about the Qs. And this is a little corner of time trades that I don't often talk about much, but I took advantage of the influencers feature, and this is kind of where you can sort of peel the onion on the machine learning and see what the machine learning is considering. So if we go to the calendar over here, we can see that we've got some probabilities of 2 standard deviation moves down that are triggered by Mars being conjunct or opposite an eclipse. So and that's actually happening twice here. We've got Mars conjunct and opposite an eclipse on the 14th and on the 8th. And the way this works is I've got a history of all the eclipses, recent eclipses in the system. And I record the location of those eclipses. And when planets come around and make conjunctions or oppositions to those eclipses, then I basically record that for the machine learning. And Mars being conjunct or opposite an eclipse is among the top 30 most influential timing events. So this is really useful. And the last time this happened actually was, I checked the data, January 24th, Mars was also conjunct and opposite an eclipse on January 24th. So there's actually 2 eclipse points that are being triggered. There was a solar eclipse in July 2019, and another partial solar eclipse in January 2019. And both of those eclipse points are going to be triggered by Mars on February 8th and February 14th. So February 8th is Tuesday. February 14th is coming up at the end of the yellow period here. So that's a contributor to that date as well. So I wanted to mention that because this is kind of interesting information. You don't see anyone on social media or financial astrologers talking about these old eclipse points being triggered by planets. So I thought this was an interesting little bit of information to share. Okay, so these eclipse points are included in the probabilities. So these are being considered in the probabilities of these yellow and orange lines that are drawn here. Okay, so that's it for indexes. Let's take a look at some stocks. So what I typically do is I like to go over to the models page, and then I like to sort it by moves up and moves down, and especially 2 standard deviation moves down, because those tend to be the most accurate. So 2 standard deviation moves either up or down are more accurate than 1 standard deviation moves up or down. And JP Morgan came right to the top. You can see the QQQ there. That's also very, very close to the top. We've got almost 500 stocks in the system now. So if a stock makes it to the first page here, it's got a very strong probability of something happening. So what I love about this JPM forecast is we've got a pivot high here, February 9th, followed by a strong sequence and cluster of down days that looks like it wraps up around, February 23rd, right around that teal line. Okay, so this is a great looking short opportunity in my opinion. We did great shorting JPM back in this area here into the lows on January 24th. I wouldn't be surprised to see it challenge those lows again with this cluster of 2 standard deviation down days coming up. So JPM's part of the financials. So I like to also look at some other financial stocks. We've got Goldman Sachs here. Goldman Sachs showing a pivot low February 9th. So this one isn't as strong or as compelling a trade setup as JPM. So I likely won't take this one, but they do tend to trade in concert with each other. Let's look at Morgan Stanley. Morgan Stanley, very similar to JPM. We've got 51% probability of a pivot high coming up February 8th, followed by some strong down days, and another big down day on February 14th. And if you're a time trades user, you'll notice February 14th tends to turn up in more symbols than not. So this looks like a very interesting day coming up, something to be aware of. And then finally, we can look at the XLF, the financial sector here. With interest rates going up, there's likely to be a lot of volatility in XLF. So this one is what I would call a little, I describe this as a little contradictory. We've got a pivot high up here February 10th, but in a perfect world, we would see some moves down in the following days, but that's not happening. Instead, we have some one probability moves up. So it's a little conflicted, the forecast. Often what I do is if I were to trade XLF, I would focus in on the pivots. So we've got a pivot high, that those tend to be very accurate. And then we've got a pivot low down here on March 1. That also tends to be very accurate. We've got a small cluster of low probability 2 standard deviation moves here as well. And I would discount, I guess, the 1 standard deviation moves that are occurring down here. Although I can very much see the XLF going up into this pivot. After this pivot, especially after the yellow period, it looks like the trend is going to be down. Okay, so that's some advice on how to interpret these conflicting moves. But I think out of everything we've looked at here, JPM has the clearest probabilities and the clearest forecast. Let's take a quick look at commodities. In last week's video, I shared silver producers as a long idea. That got a little bit of a pop off of this pivot low, but it really hasn't lifted off yet. It looks like it's got a great shot to lift off for real in the next 10 days or so, especially coming into February 15th, February 17th. And there's some small probability pivot highs up here, but you definitely wouldn't want to hold this beyond February 17th or so. It looks like it's going to have a little bit of a correction after that. Okay, so that's the silver producers, still looking good. UNG, also known as the Widowmaker. Let's just clean this up here. We'll turn off the south node. So UNG has a huge cluster of 2 standard deviation moves up right with this Gann wave yellow period. It's a tough one to trade, but I like the way it's coming back down. You really got to be quick on taking profits on this thing. Otherwise, you'll end up like this with this giant reversal. So this is not for the faint of heart. But if you like volatility and have nerves of steel, this looks like a setup worth considering for about the next 3, 4, 5 day period into February 11th, where the last of these 2 standard deviation moves occurs. Okay, so that's UNG. Let's do a quick review of crypto here. We're going to start with Bitcoin. Actually, I'm going to start with the models page because I wanted to share with you a bunch of new coins that I've added here. Mana, Matic, OMG, Sia Coin, TRX, added a lot of new coins. I spent a lot of time redoing data access for crypto in general, and I'm pretty happy now with how things are looking. Yeah, so the 1 standard deviation moves down on Luna are just really dominating the forecast here. Okay, like that is huge for the next couple of weeks. Just day after day, if I put my mouse here right at about 50%, like almost half of the bars, half of the forecasts are for down days of 1 standard deviation on Luna. Looks like that down pressure will continue until at least February 19th, when we see a probability of a pivot low. Yeah, looks like the trend is down on Luna. Let's take a look at another one of our new coins here, Mana. So we've got Mana here, and we can see that the mean up move is 0.96 over the next 15 trading days. So let's go and take a look at what we see here. And in general, it's a pretty positive looking forecast here for Mana, with a solid, 10 days or so of up probabilities, either 1 or 2 standard deviations, and then followed by a pivot low. And often what these can be is, if you've got up followed by a pivot low, those can be corrections in time where the symbol just sort of treads water, goes sideways for a bit as it passes the time. And then once this pivot low occurs, then it's free to move up. So let's take a look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin is starting to perk up here. So I mentioned back in January that I wasn't going to be interested in Bitcoin until March, but it really looks like it's starting to find its legs, establish some support. Although it looks like it may have one more retest of this area down here in the high 30s, low 40s around February 13th. But February 13th looks to be the last major pivot for Bitcoin. And then we start to see pivot highs. So just connect the dots, pivot low, pivot high, and there's some moves up in between, but there's also some forecast moves down. But in general, the pivot highs tend to act as a magnet and will pull the stock up, or the coin up in this case. And then even after this pivot high, we start to see the forecast moves down disappear, and the forecast moves up continue. So looks like it's going to be a strong spring for Bitcoin. I mean, this forecast may not look like much, but we all know Bitcoin can move 10, 15 grand in just a matter of days. So even these consistent patterns of 1 standard deviation moves can translate into big moves over a short period of time. Let's look at Ethereum. Ethereum also looking bullish here. So we've had a great week. There was a big move up yesterday, and we can see a cluster of 1 standard deviation moves up coming up in mid-February, another pivot low late February, but then after that, the dominant feature is forecast moves up and pivot highs. Okay, so again, starting to look like a very, very strong spring across many coins, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and my favorite at the moment is probably Litecoin. Litecoin has a huge cluster of 1 standard deviation moves up happening in March, and then more clusters after that in April and May, culminating in a pivot high in late May. So lots of interesting activity here in the world of crypto. Okay, I'm going to close out today's call. Sorry it's so long, but I did get a request from a user for a review of what's happening in India. So I'm just going to sort by exchange here. I'm going to add some filtering capabilities to the screen in the near future, but I just want to give this a quick scan and see what's kind of moving or forecast to move in the next 15 trading days here. So is there anything big in the 2 standard deviation moves here that we can see in among India stocks? Okay, so Divi's Laboratories is forecast to have a big move down. So we can take a look at that one. And also, I want to take a look at Asian Paints and Eicher Motors. So Eicher Motors has a very high mean probability of 1 standard deviation moves up. So let's take a look at this. And yeah, this is a very strong forecast here with just an enormous cluster of 1 standard deviation moves up with a pivot high on March 14th. That's very much a tradable pattern through March 14th. And the other thing I like about this is what happened the last time with the Gann wave, right? If we look at the yellow Gann wave, that aligned with a high. And we've got a spike in probability moves up aligning with that yellow Gann wave period. And then we've got the pivot high over here aligning with the second yellow Gann wave period. So by buying now, basically you get 2 Gann wave yellow periods and only 1 blue period. So blue periods at least seem to be an area of weakness, at least the last time it hit. So that's Eicher Motors. That's looking good. What else do we want to look at here in India? Let's take a look at Asian Paints, which has a high probability of a move down. Just click on that properly. And sure enough, it's like Eicher Motors in reverse. So we've got a large and growing cluster of 1 standard deviation moves down between now and February 25th. So this might be one that could be worth playing on the downside if you're into shorting or buying puts. Okay, and then the last India stock we want to take a look at is, whoops. We took a look at Asian Paints, we took a look at Eicher Motors, and now we want to take a look at what else is big over here. Divi's Laboratories, yeah, that was the one. It had a lot of 2 standard deviation moves down over the next 15 trading days. And yeah, we can see here that that's also part of a cluster of 1 standard deviation moves down. So this little correction that we're seeing here looks like a wonderful opportunity to establish short positions. So maybe it comes up a few more points here. And then by February 14th, it'd be a great stock to enter short. Okay, so that's it for this week. I hope you enjoyed this week's presentation. I look forward to sharing my thoughts with you next week. Good trading, and we'll talk to you later.